Well, welcome everybody to our latest Altered Attitude podcast. We haven't done one for a little while. Had some change in circumstances, but here we are again with Danny.
Hello.
And we thought we'd have a talk about sort of a bit about my journey and a bit about being a referral or a addiction advisors and how important we think it is to the addiction treatment industry. There's some stuff brewing about it, so we thought we'd add our voice to the conversation. And so Danny's masterfully come up with some questions, and I shall do my best to answer them. So welcome again anyway.
Thank you. So I think probably a good place to start is really the context about your journey. So tell us a little bit about how you ended up in the addiction treatment industry.
Wow, that was a long time ago. Like I say, I've got no short stories because it's like 34, 35 years ago that I ended up coming into addiction treatment myself. Part of the program of the 12-step program, which I come into on this beautiful island called Galiano in Canada, was helping other people as part of the program. And they also have literature and things to learn and stuff like that. I couldn't even read and write at the time. I was sort of 25 years old.
That always blows me away when you say that.
Yeah, well, I think because of a pretty traumatic childhood and probably sort of undiagnosed dyslexia. They used to
dyslexia,
just put us in special groups. And so I was always in special English, special maths,
right,
special everything, get excused from French. And I just really couldn't understand what anyone was saying to me. That was
no.
I tell people that when I think back in my memory, when I think of being in a classroom, some of the teachers that I liked like the metalwork, the woodwork, I like the practical stuff. I like the physics teacher, and I like the English teacher.
Yeah,
who actually did get me to do stories and things like that, which I quite liked. But
you can tell that a little bit because you are quite academic now, even though you don't describe yourself as ever being academic, but you are because you like to read and learn.
Every day I really work hard and learning every day. I have done I think since, again, coming into recovery, because recovery to me has always been about development. You know, you realise at the beginning you think, well, I've got to stop taking drugs, I've got to stop drinking. But then you realise there's so much more to it than that.
Definitely.
That there's stuff that I didn't realise. And part of that was that this lady, Beth, that kind of become a bit of a mentor to me in Canada, that she used to read a lot and I told her that I couldn't read and write. And so she used to give me these little booklets about any old thing, really. And she'd give me a dictionary and said, if you can't understand a word, look it up and
It's
learn
a dangerous
the word.
game, isn't it?
Yeah, well, but I've started to. It's like reading still can be quite uncomfortable, but I get excited about. You find a word that you don't know what the word means, and I like to look the word up. So I realise I do like learning, and so I think early on it made me realise how important it was to get education.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I started to read, and then you've got this spiritual, which they call kind of like the fourth dimension. You get all this spiritual literature, and because there's a lot of New Agey at the time, it was kind of this whole thing that was quite cool.
Yeah.
That you were quite cool and a bit, if you knew about spiritual stuff.
And we're not just talking like traditional religious context either. We're talking about like Buddhism,
this was all like
Gandhi and all that kind of stuff.
Dope,
yeah,
crystals and
all that kind of
mushrooms
stuff.
and all
being
that
connected
sort of
to
stuff.
the earth.
Yeah, all very hippie. There were a lot of hippies where I was.
Yeah,
but again, it's mind blowing. It's like mind opening, which again I think a lot of what I realise is that it's about the mind opening. I kind of very much sort of come to believe that addiction is about having a closed mind. So I'm going to take my shoe off first.
Struggling with the foot, aren't you?
It's addiction's about, having a closed mind, and taking drugs and drinking is attempting to open that mind. But but also found things like education, learning, being inspired. A lot of other things open your mind in a more healthy way. So for me, education obviously was part of that, because I was learning all of this stuff that was kind of mind-blowing. And again, when your mind's been stuck in such a low state for most of your childhood, you don't realise that. You just don't realise. It's like for example, you eat an orange. I remember once comes to mind, I was sitting on a building site, just starting to have this kind of spiritual awakening, and I'm eating an orange, and then I kind of looked at this orange and started thinking, how did all that juice get in that orange?
Yeah.
How did all them little parts, little pockets? How does a tree do that?
Yeah.
How does a tree know how to do that? And even the bloke next to me, I went, mate, have you had a good look at an orange? How does a tree? And he was like, what are you on? I'm like, well, funny enough, nothing.
Yeah.
But when your mind starts sort of getting blown by the real world, you start getting interested in how fantastic life is and how complex and how amazing, and you can just never learn enough.
No. So is that what part of that journey? Do you think that was what kind of made you want to go? Because you've mentioned that you are part of a 12-step program. That's kind of been your background. Is that the bit that kind of drove you into wanting to help people? Do you think?
I think it's kind of that. Part of it was, you learn something, and what you learn really helps change your life.
Yeah.
Which I was excited about. I think that's the thing.
Yeah.
I was excited about it from the very beginning. Not that I found a solution to my problem.
Yeah.
But it was really inspiring to me. I could kind of sort of see it as this is almost world changing. At least it was for me. And that is something that you could share with other people, and it's exciting to share with other people. Even now, it's explaining things to people and they understand it.
Yeah.
It's very satisfying for me as well. And so you realise that when you actually see somebody who starts to improve, and you think in some small part that's something to do with you.
100%,
You know, like people say, if I can only help one other person, but you get to help hundreds of people.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them turn nasty on you.
Well, you can't win them all.
Well, and again, it's very complex, and I think that's the thing about people are complex.
People as a whole, isn't it?
Yeah, and you just don't know what's inside them.
Yeah.
Some people are very hurt, and
exactly.
and it really disturbs them because you start having to deal with your problems. So you become a bit of a problem-solving person, but not everybody wants their problem solved, apparently.
Well,
which doesn't make any sense to me.
No, it's a bit of a journey though, peaks and troughs, isn't it? It's a bit like weight loss. It's like people rarely go linear, so it's kind of like up and down, isn't it? So, and then all that dysfunction as well on top of that, which is quite distressing.
There's depths of it, and again, because you get different kinds of people as you learn as you go along, and I kind of see addiction as addiction. I know people sort of say, addiction's complicated, and I don't necessarily agree. I think the symptoms are very complicated. But I think the addiction I believe in is sort of very clear that it sort of centres in the brain. And I think that's the same for everybody. But on then the outside of that, it can get a little bit complex, the way people are responding to it.
Yes.
The way that they're managing it, the way they're trying to survive. And then you kind of get, it's difference when you've got somebody that's been brought up by two loving parents. They've had good education, they've been supported, and they've not really even got they can't even think of, I don't know what trauma I've got, and you don't get many people like that, because I don't think many people have that experience, but you do get people that are like, I don't even know why I'm here, I'm just as bad a heroin addict as them, but I don't even know why. I think that Jack about the ketamine, I think he's one of them.
On the surface he had it all, didn't he?
Well, exactly. So again, there's something different about him than other people that kind of triggered. But then you get the people that have had terrible abuse, terrible childhoods, terrible problems. See, the addiction's the same, but it's wrapped in all these other problems.
The environment again, isn't it?
Yeah, so helping somebody recover from addiction that's had a pretty, even emotional intelligence. You know, that they've developed their emotions, that they're quite
And
in
that's
control.
a big bit I think most people struggle with or miss a little bit, isn't it? The emotional intelligence
I
side.
don't even know if people like it that way, but let's say maturity, emotional maturity.
Yeah.
That you know, you find the people that have not been developed very well.
No.
Their backgrounds are a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
They're quite underdeveloped. So I find with them people that it's more about helping them develop.
Yeah.
It's the addiction treatment and the development.
Sure.
And they have to kind of go hand in hand
Yeah.
for them to work. And I think a lot of people, they could just take the addiction treatment and then ignore the development.
Which kind of brings me on, I guess, to the next bit really, is about how you started your, I guess, let's call it your professional career in addiction treatment, because you've had a bit of a vast array of experiences. So where did it actually start for you?
Well, I think when I come back from Canada to Watford, and, you know, I'd had a pretty good time in Canada. Really enjoyed it there. Had a really good group of people around me that were very well developed and had a great understanding. When I come back to Watford, I didn't feel that they had the same. So kind of I've been taught to, they got a thing called the Big Book, which is like it's a textbook really. It gives you instructions of how to work the 12-step program. But when you actually do that, people see as a fanatic.
Yeah, because there's a lot of sort of misinformation a little bit about the 12-step programme and AA and how people view it a little bit as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and they're pretty rebellious people, so they don't like being told anything. And so that you sort of try and avoid that. But I kind of liked doing that, and so I started to try and get involved in the groups. And part of it is sort of reaching out to other people, but I noticed that people were caught up in themselves too much.
Right.
And see, part of the program is the 12-step is having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. Well, the spiritual awakening as a result of the steps is you learn to identify selfishness, self-seeking, self-pity.
Right,
but they all seem to not be able to do that.
No.
So they were very selfish, and a lot of the problems they were suffering from and talking about at meetings was about their own selfishness.
Right.
And
these were just general AA meetings that you were kind of meeting
AA,
people through? NA, all those kind of
CA
things.
at the time. So you kind of realise, look, these people are suffering from self.
Yeah.
They're talking about suffering from self. We got a program that teaches you how not to suffer from self.
Yeah.
But they don't want to hear it.
No.
And so even in AA, they don't do AA. And so I decided that there's a few other things, but to keep it short, I decided to start doing 12-step groups.
Okay.
Outside AA.
Okay.
So it was like, if you want to spend 3 months following this course as it's written, then you can come and join a group. If you don't want to do that, that's fine, don't come. And I found about 10 or 12 guys that said, we'd like to do that. And so for 3 months, we set the goals of the course and what was expected of you. Again, just what, we kind of took what people said. If you go to AA, you're meant to meditate in the morning, do infantry at night, get a sponsor, we went to 90 meetings in 90. We sort of done all the things that you're supposedly meant to do.
Like the benchmarks of like that.
What we'd picked up.
Yeah.
And we agreed that for 3 months we were all going to do that. And so we started to do that. Now, around the meetings, people literally noticed the change in all of us.
Yeah, that's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah. And then other people started saying, could I do that course?
Yeah.
And so before long, we'd have like 40 people a week.
Wow. And this was like, this was a free course?
Free,
was it?
yeah,
completely free.
Yeah.
So more like a community-minded type
there was no
off-shop for me.
No, we used to have like a spaghetti night on a Friday.
Oh, nice, yeah.
Where we'd have everyone round and make a spag bowl. And, I'd obviously take a little bit of a donation for that. But there was no idea of money involved at that point.
No.
And I lived in this house, and that was a shared house. I had a room in it, and 3 of the people decided to move out of the house. I think I drove them out because I kept bringing all these drunk people home and stuff like that. And so I thought, I wonder if the landlord would let me take over the whole house.
Yeah.
And then I could rent the rooms to people in recovery.
Sure.
And he said yes. And so
Which is, I guess, quite rare back then.
Yeah, it was. Well, it was just, again, one thing you realise is the more you learn, you kind of go to the next progression. And it seemed like the next progression, because, again, a lot of the guys were struggling, they didn't have much support. You know, at the same time, I would make a lot of time going to coffee shops. Everywhere I went, I had about 30 people with me.
Yeah. Like the Pied Piper.
Oh, my car was full of people.
Yeah.
It was like that. Because, again, I knew that people that stopped drinking, they didn't know how to socialise.
No.
So if I went to the cinema, I'd say, anyone want to go to the cinema? And about 30 people would turn up.
Yeah.
If I said, anyone want to go to a coffee? About 30 people would turn up. Anyone want to play football on Sunday? About 30 people would turn up.
So this was while you were being a builder or carpenter at the same time?
Yeah, I was earning my money. I was earning my money being a carpenter, builder.
Yeah.
I was always self-employed.
Yeah.
And that was paying me bills, because I'm a believer in, again, the programme, self-supporting for your own contribution.
Definitely,
So I believe in earning my own money. I believe in helping other people earn their own money. Not, you know, even in when they sort of started moving into our project, it's like, if you could work, you got a job. There's no like being on the dole.
No.
You go to work. I mean, because when I went to America, I used to fly to Los Angeles. I had mates there in recovery. And people in America, they were like, here, tell us, in England, do they tell you to stay on the dole for a year if you're in recovery? And I go, yeah, they tell people that. And they honestly couldn't even believe it. They thought that would make you ill doing that.
Well, I think there'd probably be some evidence that it does make you ill.
Yeah, they so sort of...
Because you need a purpose, don't you?
And to get on and earn your own money and develop your life and develop. It's about the development. And so I sort of moved a few people in this house. Very quickly you think, oh, hang on a minute, we need some rules here.
I could imagine. Yeah. A little bit out of control.
So you start setting some sort of rules and direction and some expectations on people. And again, some people struggle with that and don't like it, but some people respond very well to it and do very well. They just need a bit of direction for a little while.
Well, I think they have kind of found that from like children growing up, isn't it? Actually, they develop sometimes easier because of the disciplines there from day dot. So it's a kind of similar, it's kind of a comfort thing, isn't it, to have rules?
Yes, I've come to believe in discipline. Society doesn't seem to, but I don't think you get good mental health. I think that's the problem with our society, that there's not enough direction. That they've sort of give everyone every direction, and I think it's driving everyone mad. Yeah,
a little bit too fragmented.
I don't think that's healthy, but especially for some people, doing what we were doing, or doing what I was doing, was working out. And then the landlord was always trying to keep everybody busy. So I realise again, is, you know, you don't want people sitting around being depressed. I've been in a lot of them projects and they're all run down and depressed. And I thought, I don't want to be in here. It's depressing. So I say to the landlord, if you sort of pay for the paint, we'll redecorate the house and do the houses up. So he paid for the paint. I got everyone. I mean, when I moved in the house, this is what I was like. There was 3 other guys in there, and they had all this old rotten furniture, the arms broken off and all that. And they come home from work one day. They said, "Where's all the furniture?" And I took it out in the garden and lit it. They're like, "Why have you burn all the furniture?" I said, "It stinks, it's filthy, and there's a mouse living in the couch." I said, "But I'll arrange you the charity shop. If we all put like 40 quid in each, we can get some new furniture."
Yeah.
And so that's kind of why I was. And they all moaned, but then when we got the new furniture, and they said, "Look, if we put an extra £2 in a week, we can get Sky Telly."
Yeah, so it's like progression then, isn't it?
Oh, it's just development. And they all moan and struggle, but when it's actually done, they're all a lot happier and less depressed.
Well, I suppose because some of them, would you say it's fair to say, were a bit stuck staying in that situation?
Depressed. Yeah. Honestly, it's like it's the amount of people that you meet that are depressed. They don't even know they are.
No.
Because they're uninspired. It's like their brain's stuck.
Yeah, it's true.
And when you sort of drive them along a little bit and they start experiencing it, they start like lightening up a little bit and it brings a better energy. But in the end, the energy, it drove them all out. They didn't like the addiction treatment bit that I was doing. But that felt like then it felt like it was a bit like a calling almost for me to do that. I was just good at it for some people.
Yes.
And again, it's not easy because there's a lot of arguing and there's a lot of like standing up to people and a lot of, it's not an easy task. But again, I only considered myself a builder who was in recovery helping people.
Yeah, and that's kind of where you were happy to be left sat, but it didn't kind of end that way for you, did it?
It costs like £250 a month to live in the house, including your food.
Yeah.
And then the landlord, because he was happy with how well things were run and how well the house was, another house come up down the street, about 4 doors. He said, "You want to take that one?" And so we took that over, done it up, filled it up with people. We ended up with about 4 houses in that street.
Oh, blimey. So he was happy.
He was very happy. He was getting his rent money and getting his properties all done up. And because it was so, like, then it became like a bit
community-minded,
And I think people respect that and liked it.
Yeah. Well, it gave people hope, I should imagine. So.
Well, because again, we had a lot of people living there. We had a lot of people coming round for doing their, like, spaghetti nights, film nights, barbecues, parties. Again, I just realised that community is important.
Yeah. So on that street, because you mentioned there was 4 houses, I'm guessing they were relatively close together.
Yeah.
Did you ever get any issues with the other residents on that street? Because a lot of people.
Well, funny enough, when I'd already left, this another long story, but in short, this probation officer wrote a really shitty email when she was and sent it, saying all the people had overdosed and the neighbours complained and all the rest of it.
That's why I thought I'd ask the question.
Oh, and the Lowestoft County Council got hold of it when I was going for planning and proudly read it out, and that caused a bit of a stir. And they said, and he's under police investigation. But the local county council had asked the police in Watford to investigate me.
Right.
And then put in the paper that I was under police investigation. But what they didn't know is I knew the police in Watford.
Right.
As a criminal and as somebody that was
gone into recovery.
And done really well.
Yeah.
And so I phoned them up and they said, "Leave it with us, we'll do an investigation of our own." He said, "Yeah, they asked us to do an investigation." And I said, "Well, what did they find out?" He said, "Well, funny enough, you don't know if you had 2 coppers as your neighbours." And they said they loved it.
Undercover
they said
coppers.
you brought a lot of community to the street.
Yeah.
There was never any problems.
Yeah.
There was never any ambulances called. There was never any police.
No.
Any time the police were called, or when we got burgled by someone.
Right.
But there was never any problems. In actual fact, most people were sorry to see that we'd actually left.
Right. And why did you leave?
Because one day it turns out I've become successful at helping people, and all the local authorities turned up.
Right, which we will be diving into a little bit deeper. But so this is where I guess the policies and procedures
That
things
was the
start
beginning
to
of
happen.
that nightmare.
Yes, which has kind of then sustained throughout your professional career.
The slow poisoning of policy and procedure.
So what happened with that?
Well, they all turned up at my house and said, "Look, we can see you really help people. We know you really help people. We know some of the people that you've helped, but you've got no fire alarms."
Right.
It was before even rented places. There's
Or
no
even
fire.
people at home.
Yeah, you've got no fire doors. You're not doing your fridge temperatures, and
Love a fridge
you've
temperature.
not got all your training. And I'm like, well, I'm just a bloke helping people, just a builder. I'm not.
Yeah.
They're like, well, no, you are a project and you can't carry on doing it. I'm like, there's a crack house down the road. You've not got them to do all the policies and procedures.
Yeah.
And I literally said to them, so what you're saying is if somebody's dying out the front of my house with a needle sticking out their arm, if I step over them, that's fine. But as soon as I start helping them, there's laws. And it don't get me wrong, I kind of understand to a degree where they're coming from. But at the same time, that's not all good what they're doing. And so I said, well, tell me what you want me to do then. And they give me a long list of things to do. And I spoke to the landlord and he said, like, I don't want to, I'll give him a 5-year plan. I said, like, I'll do all the work.
Yeah.
you just pay for the material. But he said, I don't want it, and you can raise our rent. Then I'll have to charge people more money to live here.
Yeah.
And he said he didn't want to do it. So I kind of wanted to get out of Watford anyway, and had a friend down in Suffolk. And so I thought, I'll have a look down there. And because I did buy one of the properties and it went up quite considerably,
Right.
that I found an 8-bedroom property in Lowestoft for the same price as my 3-bedroom house
Wow.
in Watford. And it had all the fire doors and fire alarms. And I'd done a bit of research and they seemed happy that I was moving down there.
Okay.
And so I sold up and moved down there. Pretty much the day I moved in, they didn't become happy anymore.
And why was that?
Well, again, people just go into a panic because I think because people have got a stereotype in their head.
100%, yeah.
And some of the other projects in the area were pretty bad. Mine just wasn't a bad project
No,
because I run it with a bit of an iron fist.
Yeah.
And so I policed it very well. But they had this idea of, all these drug addicts throwing needles everywhere and raping and murdering everyone.
Because that's what drug addicts do, obviously, isn't it?
Well, some do, and again, I can see where they're coming from, but it's not quite true.
No.
But again, one of the things they said about Watford is they kind of regret I left. I made quite an impact
Yeah.
to the whole recovery community in Watford. We increased meetings, we increased the quality of groups. This is the bit I don't think people realise, how much we bring to that sort of
Community as a
community,
whole.
that, in the margins community, that we have people like me have quite a profound effect.
Yeah.
Make quite a natural difference.
Yeah. And not just for those individuals directly, the people around them too, isn't it?
Yes, because again, as they getting better, their families are getting better.
Yeah.
They're helping more people in the community.
Yeah.
The addicts help each other.
Exactly.
And so it really does bring down a lot of the problems and a lot of the resources from the local authorities. It doesn't get taken by them.
Yes.
But they kind of add to the recovery capita, they call it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
But they're very short-sighted and they didn't really measure the profound effect that
the long-term effect
projects like mine have on the community.
Sure.
Because they're full of fear and misunderstanding. But again, Dan, when you get to try and explain to them, they're just so negative and full of fear. They just don't listen to you.
No, and I think there's other reasons for that, like which again we'll definitely touch upon sort of later on. But so you landed in Lowestoft and you moved into this 8-bedroom house. What was your plan at that point?
Well, to try and do more of the policy, more of the procedure, trying to turn it into like a proper. I only wanted to do clean and sober living.
Right, okay, that was the goal at that point.
Because it was like very cost effective.
Yeah.
But the more they kind of regulate you and the more they kind of push you along, the more expensive you become.
Yes.
The more professional you have to become.
Yeah.
And you start losing something.
So did that start off very quickly then?
The day I moved in, it's almost like they started attacking me.
Right.
Like, didn't they? They just started, like, in all the newspapers, they were lying about me. The local authorities were lying about me. They were saying, needles have been turning up in the school. And it's like, well, I don't give people needles, you do. And, every crime they kind of try to blame on me. But again, you realise that some of the people on the planning lived in that area and had businesses in that area.
Yeah, because it was kind of the nicer end of that particular area.
Yeah, there was kind of like yes, and there was all agendas as well. But as the years went by and they started to see in reality what a great project it was, most of them people come back and apologised.
Oh, well, that's always nice. Not many people get that chance, do they?
Because again, we did a good job. The HMO guy, which they didn't really want to give us, he said that's the first time in his career he's ever come to a place where he's never had to make any recommendations.
Wow.
Again, we were trying to do something good, make people responsible in very difficult conditions. Working with drug addicts, it's not easy.
No. So you had a vision of it being like a sober living house, but then that kind of evolved from that point, didn't it?
Yeah, well, they keep each sort of round of inspections from this. It used to be Danos, and then it became a CQC.
Okay.
It's like every round of inspections, they try and make you more like the NHS.
Right. Okay.
And at the beginning, they didn't really have any because in addiction treatment, kind of like the local authorities in the NHS, they kind of left all the addiction treatment to the private sector.
Oh, okay.
And they didn't really have a rule book for you because everything they did was mostly NHS.
Right.
Which is kind of a bit problematic, I think, in the end, because you know, the way I explain it, it's like you got this socialist system in a capitalist country.
Yes, they kind of clash a bit.
Well, they can do you a lot of harm.
Yeah.
Because they try and treat you like they are. But I kind of had to earn money. They're given money.
Yeah, and that's always a bigger picture because I think a lot of people don't really understand money is always involved, regardless of which line you go down, whether it is private or if it is charity or if it is NHS, it's whatever. Money is always floated about here.
Well, that was one of the hard things for me because at the beginning it was never about money, but obviously you got to pay rent.
Yes.
And you know,
and staff, I'm guessing by that point.
And even as a builder, when I was at a builder and had me 3 houses, pretty much 50 grand a year I was earning, and most of that was going into keeping that project going. I wasn't getting any money. I'm not somebody that thinks about charity. I like to earn my living, and I think people should earn a living if you can.
Yeah.
If you can't, then that's fine. But if you can earn a living, you should earn a living.
Yes.
That's kind of what our society's about, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
So I always try and think of ways of sort of earning a living without being a charity, going begging for money.
Yes.
I find that very difficult. And
so with that, so you had one house, and then it kind of expanded from there, didn't it? Yeah,
well, that was in 2015. David Cameron become sold on recovery.
And
so
what? Explain that a little bit more. What does that mean?
That was when recovery meant being abstinent.
Okay.
And because we were a more abstinent-based project, a lot of funding started coming our way.
Which was nice for us.
It wasn't like funding like they were giving us money.
No.
They would send us, they were funding people to come there.
Oh, okay.
So I liked it that way. So it's like essentially they were paying me to do work rather than giving me money to do work.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
I like that. I could do that. So you'd set this is what it costs to have someone come to our project. Because again, I kind of always liked that development bit. So I was kind of, even though we could help the people that only needed like 6 weeks treatment because they had pretty stable backgrounds and that kind of thing, we could also keep people for 9 months and longer. But nobody wanted to pay for that.
Right.
So I kind of had a system where if I made enough money at the front, then that paid for all of the projects. So we had a lot of back-to-work projects. We had a lot of housing projects. Because again, it's like if you empower people, they go and do it for themselves.
Yeah.
And so we've always been more about empowering people. And eventually they go and get their own, like people used to work on our projects and they go, oh, I'm sick of this. I need to earn a living. And I'm like, well, good. That's what you're meant to do. Go and get a job.
That's the goal, isn't it?
That's the goal. The goal was taxpayers.
Yeah.
Go and get a job. You should be paying for your own way. You're an adult.
Well, you've learned some skills. You've learned how to socialise, look after yourself.
I've seen some miracles. And of people that you'd think these people are like never going to amount to anything that end up doing incredible things. Once the brain starts redeveloping in the right environment, it's almost like seeing the dead walk.
Yeah, and I completely relate to that because there's a couple of people from working at East Coast Recovery as well. Like there would be, you place money, they shouldn't even be alive, let alone these amazing people that are helping others over and above and really creating big change.
Yeah, it could take like 4 to 10 years for someone to really change.
Yeah.
But without the right environment, I just don't think that's impossible.
So East Coast Recovery, that was what it became.
It become quite a big, successful rehab and development centre with lots of projects. Yeah. Making a massive difference to a lot of people's lives.
That looked like monetary-wise. Did that look like, you said people were paying for people to come into there, so it was kind of like a statutory thing?
It started off being, because again, the way in England, you kind of got two kind of revenues. You've got your statutory, which is more your government funded.
Right.
So they would go to their local authorities, and the local authorities would fund them for a rehab placement.
Okay.
But then you get the private sector.
Yes.
Now, the private sector are people that just pay for themselves.
Okay.
So they don't go through all of the hoops of the...
No.
And so, because we were sort of a lower end,
Yeah.
we were a lot more affordable for the lower end of the private sector.
Right. Okay.
So probably, you know, without the private sector, that most of they come through referrals. We used to get a lot of word of mouth in the end, but we worked with a lot of referrals companies. Not a lot, because we didn't like them all. Some of them were decent, some of them weren't decent.
Yeah.
So we tried to work with the decent ones. And they would always prop up our business, really, because in the end, even with the government sector ones, what you was realising, again, every time they come and regulate you, the more regulation, they push the prices up.
Can you explain that a little bit more? How does the prices go up when regulation goes up? Because I'm guessing a lot of people don't understand.
Well, even
why.
like a simple thing, right? They had where they wanted to. So the more regulation, the more training. Even the more employment, the more employment law, the more training your staff have to have, which costs money.
More skilled
More
type
skills,
of
the
staff.
time they have to spend doing that stuff where they're not working with clients.
Yeah.
So if you've only got 40 hours in a week, and they're taking 20 hours up filling in paperwork,
admin,
they're only actually working 20 hours. So you're really only getting paid half for what what you want them to be doing.
Yeah.
So just to give you a silly example, once they come along and say, look, we want you to put this sexual health leaflet in the back of one of your folders, our Altered Attitudes folder.
Okay.
And I'm like, no one's going to read it. It's rubbish, and nobody's going to read it. But because they make it a stipulation, you have to do it.
Yeah.
But printing it and the time to print it, cost me about $2,500 a year.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Which was like probably the profit of one 12-week client.
Yeah.
So every time they make a new law, you either put your prices up or you lose the money.
And by putting the prices up, I guess that means it's less you're less able to be accessed, isn't it?
It's even stranger than that, because at some point they drive you realise that they started then doing these tendering, which again, it's all control.
And
they
tendering is quite tricky.
Really comes down to this: if you want this contract, you need to meet all these regulations. So again, it's another way of controlling you and driving up they say it's like driving up the standards, but it's actually creating more policy procedure, more regulation.
Right.
And so you end up doing more of what they want than what you want.
Yes.
But then you start to realise at some point they're also bringing down the price. So they're setting the price.
Yeah.
So they're saying, we're only going to give you £650 a week, but we want you to do all of this.
So you've got double the work.
But to do all of that in the rehab of my size, it costs me like £1,200 a week.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm even falling short. So the referrals in the private sector, they paid a lot more than the public sector.
Yes.
So the private sector ends up, can't have the word then, I've got it, subsidising.
Yes.
So you end up, not only are these people making your life a misery, now you're subsidising them.
And also with subsidising with the people who probably shouldn't be subsidising them. You could argue that.
Well, I'm the one subsidising them because that's my profit.
Yes, yeah.
And I'm not getting any profit.
Yeah.
Because I'm having to subsidise.
Totally.
And again, when I was in that state of mind of I'm just trying to help people, you don't mind doing it.
No.
Well, you don't realise until someday these arseholes, sorry for swearing, but they are arseholes, come along and say, we've pushed the prices up so much now, we can't afford to pay you anymore.
Yeah.
And then they cut the funding.
That was the next bit I was going to speak to you about. Because obviously there was almost like an influx of money at one point for addiction treatment, but then the funding cuts came.
They cut the funding.
And what year would you say that was?
Top of my head, I can't remember. That
I know we've done a blog post on it.
I think it started around, again, about the same time. Let's say about 2018. But it's not even just that. It's like, it's multi-pronged. See, they build all these relationships with you. Because, again, I'm not working in the private sector.
No.
I'm doing very small amounts in the private sector. So I'm not developing, which, again, is a mistake. Looking back, and this is a warning to the wise, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Do not trust the government.
No, not when it comes to funding, because it can go like that.
Well, but they sort of force you into this position because they're the law that you kind of have to work with them.
Yes.
And then they build you. They kind of lure you into all these very codependent, I'd like to say, relationships. And you kind of go along with it, and then all of a sudden they cut the funding because they've got some other political agenda going on.
So you had a mix of, like you said, mainly what we classed as statutory clients.
Yeah, I'd have 45 clients and about 35 staff.
Right.
To pay at the time.
Yeah.
And probably about 10, 15 of them would be private, and 30 of them would have been statutory.
Right, okay.
But the statutory were the ones that needed the projects, that most of the profit was going to fund them projects. So it was a good kind of business model for it was even working well for them as it was for me. And at the time, I didn't mind sort of subsidising them.
No.
The projects were working wonderful. People were doing great. They were getting it cheap. I was paying for it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I wasn't unhappy with that.
No.
I was still sort of earning a wage and doing all right.
So then all of a sudden the big C word hits.
They pulled the funding. They cut the funding, which, if you read the Dame Carol Black report, that was a big mistake. Because, again, it was based on, there's so many things I could talk about, but for me it just comes down to this one thing. That they said in their own report, for every £1 they give somebody like me, I give the government a £4 return, or society. But why would you stop giving someone the £1? That's how insane it was.
Yeah.
And again, we've seen the other £4 now. The prisons are overflowing, the death rate's through the roof, social services are through the roof.
Yeah.
That's because they cut funding for people like me. We had like 5 rehabs in our area. Got none in him, no more.
So that caused a lot of rehabs to close from what you've just described.
Kind of, for me, in a funny way, if you remember now, there's 2 sectors. You've got the statutory and the private. So with all intents and purposes, I closed to the statutory sector.
Right, okay. So this was East Coast Recovery still we're talking about.
Yes, I had to collapse the whole rehab, get rid of all of the projects, all of the good things, all of the back to work. I had to let go half the staff. And we went down to to give you an idea, went down to about 10, 15 private clients. Yeah. And I was earning more money with 10 clients than I was earning with 45 clients.
And that's mad. So overall, that probably
it shows you what good we were doing.
Yeah, yeah.
And how there was no consultation. No. There was no concern for what we were doing, what was happening in our society. It's a catastrophe.
Yeah, it is.
And again, Dame Carol Black kind of alludes to that, but I don't think she never talked to me.
No.
And I was probably one of the best rehabs in the country at the time, or projects. I wouldn't even like to call us a rehab. We were like a project that was developing people, and it was. Everybody could see how magical it was.
Yeah, I worked there probably 2 years before we closed at East Coast Recovery, and it was amazing. It was like eye opening, and I think I worked out. I did a bit of a crunch of data of about. I think it was about just under 4,000 individuals you'd helped in the time that I was there. Yeah, and that's without their families.
Again, we made a massive impact, even to the community,
Huge.
Which that impacts. There's Harmony House, and they're doing some good work at the moment. They're sort of building it up through Ricky, who come through our rehab. Again, a lot of people that come through our project went to work in the industry and are helping a lot of people today. I mean,
Totally.
if people could measure the impact of... See, again, this is where I say I think recovery, as the way I know it, as abstinence, has been defunded.
Yes.
Because that's never come back on again.
Yeah.
They don't fund projects like my one anymore. They're trying to do it all in the community.
Yeah, so that's probably another good point to actually touch upon. So we've talked about sort of rehab and those kind of recovery projects, but in the meantime, there's also other stuff going on which is government-led, let's say, through local drug and alcohol authorities. So their recovery model, because you touched on that about recovery as being the old school abstinence recovery model.
Yeah.
So that's now switched a little bit, hasn't it, with the local drug and alcohol authorities?
Yeah, well, because in the treatment you kind of got two distinct kind of models of harm minimalisation or harm reduction.
Right.
And you get abstinence. And they're kind of like the Catholics and the Protestants.
Yeah.
They're two very different theories that sort of fight against each other. But the harm minimalisation is winning.
That seems to be the more prevalent one at this point.
Yeah, well,
when it comes to trying to access help.
I think, like we sort of said, when it sort of started, because again, it's like the 12-step and the abstinent base was kind of like the global standard.
Yeah.
So that was the one to be pulled down.
Okay.
That everybody trying to pull it down all the time, still do. And I think it's been pulled down, basically.
Yeah.
But they used to, and again, you know, the harm minimalisation was a pathway to abstinence, hopefully. Mm-hmm. And that's the way they used to sell it, is that, you know, you can't get dead people sober, which again made sense. But now that's moved on to, why does abstinence even have to be the destination?
Right.
So we're turning into a culture that's like, you know, the problem seems more difficult than the solution.
Yes.
So let's help people live with the problem.
Yeah.
Let's not be cruel.
No.
Of trying to get them to achieve the solution. Again, when you look at drug addiction, you could kind of see where people would come up with that theory, but you know, not everybody's going to get off drugs. Not everybody wants to get off drugs.
No, which is a fair comment, isn't it?
Up to the point I'm saying, if you don't want to go to work, should I pay for you to stay at home? There's arguments to be had.
Yeah, totally.
For some people,
it's what it looks like, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like, for some people, it's like, you know, I can understand it, but you could get where you could condemn everybody to not having a way off of drugs, because it takes quite a strong infrastructure.
Definitely.
That, like, again, that I built, that was, you could see in reality was a structure that needed that much community and that much time
support
for people's brains to redevelop.
Yeah.
So without that kind of environment, it's very hard for people's brains to redevelop. So I don't see that environment being built.
No.
And that's the recovery environment. And so that's been defunded.
Yeah.
So there's a different version of recovery now.
So what happens then with people, so for example, if they haven't got the money to access private healthcare, because let's put it under that umbrella, for people who try and access local drug and authorities, what does that look like then?
Well, I think, as far as I know, say you go to a doctor or you can self-refer, in each area there's a government-funded drug and alcohol agency.
Yeah.
And you turn up there and work your way through their processes.
Would that lead to rehab for somebody?
I think for some people, but again, it's not like rehabbing long term.
Right, okay.
I was always about the long term.
Yes.
It'd probably be rehab in sense of like 28-day detox.
Yes.
Maybe 6 weeks. I don't think we used to have a first, second and third stage.
Right,
I don't think there's that.
Not long-term treatment.
Not long-term. They'll try and do most of it in the community because it's cheaper.
But I'm guessing with other government cuts as well, even the local drug and alcohol authorities have also been impacted by funding as well, being withdrawn.
Well, I don't know, because I don't know all their statistics, but what I see from what I can glean from the government websites, there's never been more money
being spent on it,
on addiction treatment than now in history. And since they've been spending that money, the death rates have risen. So I'm not sure what that's all about.
And do you think that's leaning more towards the harm min sort of approach to that kind of recovery?
All of it's going there.
Yeah, okay.
and they're deciding where it gets spent.
Yeah, because I think there were murmurings that they've now changed the word rehab to actually mean just you turning up and meeting your alcohol
Well,
work
they
or
changed
drug
all of the
alcohol.
words.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
again, in 2015, when David Cameron started saying you want you to do recovery, they started changing all the words, and they started pulling it back onto their harm min, because
Right.
they had this whole system set up in the country for harm minimalisation.
Yeah.
And all of us, again, it's literally like saying to the Catholics, you've got to be Protestants or you ain't getting paid.
Yeah.
So they sort of pretend to be Protestants until they can pull you back to being Catholics again. That's the way I see it.
Yeah.
Because they don't understand recovery.
No.
Because I did, and I was doing well at it. And when I talked to them, they never had a clue what I was talking about.
No. So East Coast Recovery closed.
Yep.
So what happened next?
Well, it got to a point where I just kind of myself, I was kind of like lost all the projects. And I think for me, it was kind of over then. It just become like a private rehab. And I could see more regulation coming and more pressure. And it's not really what I signed up for, even though it's still, like I said, I was still earning the same money with only 10 people that I was when I was working with 45 people for a quarter of the work. It really wasn't, just had enough. I just had enough of being involved with the government and
The policies and procedures
policies,
element.
procedures. It was all a little bit too, I was just again, it wears you out.
Yeah.
I was just worn out. You got, you had all the cutbacks. You had all the, then CQC went a bit mad for a while and started over-regulating us and losing us contracts. Then they started, they just don't stop wearing you out.
Right.
They kind of just drain your resources,
Right.
for me. And you try and do what they want. From that meeting in Watford, I tried to do what they want, and sort of 20 years later, I still
couldn't meet that.
couldn't meet their demand.
No.
And just didn't want to be a part of that anymore.
So you mentioned when we had East Coast Recovery, you used to work with a few referral companies.
Yeah.
And they would help source the clients for you?
Yeah, a lot of them would, because again, there's this whole area that I didn't realise at the time because I worked in statutory, I kind of only had about 115 customers.
Right, okay.
They're all the local authorities, so I used to just have to market to them.
Yes.
In the private sector, I didn't realise about all of the search engine optimisation and digital marketing.
Which for other people is Google. Yeah.
Which is kind of Google, but I did realise how complex it was.
Yeah.
And how much money there was involved in the private sector. I just didn't, it wasn't, my mind wasn't there. My mind was always, I literally built ECR for the statutory, and even trying to change it into the private sector was massive. I didn't realise how different the two industries are, and how much is involved in them.
Well, and as well, I would guess that with that kind of stuff is not something you'd ever thought you'd have to think about, because it's not what your forte was. Your forte was helping people to get into recovery.
And you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And again, I was quite happy with what I was doing.
Yeah.
I believed in what I was doing, and it was working really well.
Yeah.
And but realising that I've got to get into the private sector, but then learning about the private sector, I started realising this is a very different beast.
Yes.
Because again, even ECR, it had reached a kind of point, but there was like another phase that I didn't quite get to.
Right.
And it was more about, like being in the community, but because you realise that people have got a lot of different needs. I mean, I think addiction's addiction. So I think addiction treatment's pretty the same.
Yes.
But all their other needs change.
Yes.
Especially these days where people are getting diagnosed with all kinds of different illnesses. But I still think at the core of that, the addiction needs to be
It's the foundation.
Yeah, and so you sort that bit out. But then people have got all these different needs. You can't be all things to all people.
No.
But again, because we were at the foundation end of it, it's like saying, look, let's get you on a solid foundation,
Yeah.
because you can't sort any of their mental health problems out. They won't even work with you
No.
until you get sober or get you off drugs or get you at least sort of balance, which again is the harm reduction, which
Yeah.
again, I'm not against it. I can see a place
For it.
without a doubt. And we used to do a lot of it ourselves, help to just balance people out. And some people have we say they have grave emotional mental disorders, but many of them do recover.
Yes.
And so we realise that you can't be all things to all people, but when you empower people, in the community was all of them other services.
Yeah.
So we had reached a point where a lot of our guys were using them other services. So I come up with this analogy when I used to do a lot of talks for the different sectors, mostly statutory, where I talk about abstinence-based recovery now, because they were like, the other end, they'd always go, well, you're always not the only way, and you'd get stuff like that, which I never thought it was. But I do realise to get good recovery, there's certain elements that do need to be involved. And if them elements aren't in the treatment process, it's not going to be very good treatment.
Well, and to be fair, a lot of the non-12-step partners we work with include elements of the 12-step that are not called the 12-step.
Because they're just universal principles.
Yeah,
it's just AA's gathered them and collected it under the umbrella of AA. But it could be anything. As long as you've got them principles, they're important principles because they work.
Yes.
For the people that work them.
Yeah.
It's just they might not like the AA philosophy, or it might be delivered in a Christian way or a Buddhist way. But again, it's all the same stuff. There's quite a good video called God as You Understand Him, and it talks to all of the different people of faiths and people of no faith.
Yeah.
And it says these principles apply to all. They're just universal principles.
Totally.
They're just under one umbrella. But I used to have to come up with this analogy. So look, because I used to go to a lot of rollouts, of government rollouts, which means they failed.
Right.
They've just burnt out a 4-year contract at millions of pounds, and they've come to the end of the contract. They've lost the contract. Now the next group's turned up and laying out their next social experiment, I call it.
Right.
And I watched about 10 of them happen over the years.
Like a rebrand and a relaunch.
It's like literally is. Even the same people just gets rebranded and start working for a different charity.
Yeah.
With their new philosophy that's not proven.
No.
And so, but they'd invite you to the rollout. And so I'd go to the rollout and, I'd see some of them elements weren't involved in it.
Yeah.
And then when I would tell them this isn't going to work, they would like, well, you're just negative because you're this, that and the other. I'm like, well, but reality's shown you and I'm doing it and it's working for me.
The evidence is there.
I've got the evidence.
Yeah,
I've got the actual fact. You've given me the evidence.
Yeah.
You did a research and you give me the evidence how good what we're doing is because of the elements that we're applying that you haven't got in your process. And so I come up with this analogy of saying, look, it's like this. It's like, imagine it's a fruit and veg shop. And I've turned up at this rollout and they're like, look at how beautiful the shop is. And you're like, it's a beautiful shop. And look how beautiful the potatoes are. They're like, they're lovely potatoes. What about the leeks? They're the best leeks I've ever seen. They're the best apples, oranges I've ever seen. The problem is these people have a potassium deficiency.
Yeah.
And I can't see any bananas. And they're like, well, you would say that. You sell bananas.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's true, but it doesn't make it not the truth.
No.
That recovery to me was like the missing ingredient of what I've learned recovery is, not what they think it is, what I've learned it is that works for people that accept it. But then the funny thing is, you go to the people in recovery and you say to them, he's like, look, you lot can't live on bananas.
Got to have the other stuff.
You've got to have the other stuff as well. And it's like this funny divide.
Yeah, it is. It seems like it's always been that way. I mean, going back to what we were talking about in regards to referrals. So to touch upon, I guess, the next part really is talking about this. There's been a few pieces in media recently about referral companies brokers, as they like to refer to them, being almost like the robbers of the vulnerable people. Because you've moved from East Coast Recovery, relaunched as a different business, but with the same ethos.
Well, we sort of started with the idea again because we always everybody refers to each other.
Even other rehabs.
Yeah, and again, I think the whole journey with money and recovery has always been, you know, even people in AA, you kind of say that people pay for private sector and they kind of get a bit upset. And it's like, well, hang on, mate. It's like, look, if you've got enough money to send your daughter to the Priory, why are you going to send her to a free, little gloomy, run-down little rehab? They're not going to want to do that. People with money want a certain standard. And so you sort of start realising that look, everybody's making money. That's one of the things that's important, I think, to start at that point.
I think that's a good point, whether it be, like I did touch upon it earlier, whether it's charity, whether it's NHS, somebody's always paying.
You kind of get in our industry, you kind of get the charity people, you get the corporations, like the big chains, money people that, again, I'm not against any of them. And then you get just the sort of general sort of private sector people that have just started something because, you know, like me, they just wanted to do something good. Not saying them other people don't, but there is a lot of money involved. It's about £2 billion industry in our country. So it's big business. And again, I don't see that as a bad thing. That's the country we live in.
Yes.
And people are very happy with what they're getting. But you kind of realise, you know, the charity people are doing all right. Most of them are getting paid pretty well. They got nice cars, there are good pensions, good holidays, good sick pay, good benefits. And, you know, the shareholder companies are getting their profits. And I think I just read something about, you know, the Priory Group, which is probably the sort of the top of the tree in our country, that turned over something like 796 million pound and made a £62 million profit. Well, it sounds a lot. It is a lot, but it's only a small percentage of the money they invested. So for an investor, that's kind of the returns.
Well, I'm guessing as well, because they don't just work with drugs and alcohol, they also work with mental health and all that.
Yeah,
and
they're more
the
like
cost of running those facilities
hospitals,
is high, I should imagine.
Yeah, so again, I think money's one of them things. If you don't really like, I mean, I've learned to understand it better, and mostly in the last few years, because you realise that we're in this country that it's about a free market. And, you know, that means that the thing that keeps the prices down in a free market is competition.
Yes.
So that also then means that the people at the top generally want to get rid of the competition.
Yeah, it does tend to happen that way, doesn't it?
Yeah, and one way of doing that is to make a lot of regulations.
Yes.
Because it puts the smaller businesses out of business, and it makes it hard for people to start.
For sure. So just rewinding back, so Rehabs UK was created. And what did you see, what was your vision for Rehabs UK? Why did you create that off the back of East Coast Recovery?
Well, I think we sort of, while we were still doing that, we were kind of doing that because I think we see after COVID that the Zoom become a thing.
Yes.
And we did a lot of Zoom groups. And we sort of thought there'd be a place for more online sort of stuff. But again, I think you sort of also realise the world's changing.
At a rapid pace.
There's a great book called Who Moved the Cheese? And it's about these mice and men. And the cheese gets moved. And then it's a sort of a training manual on the way different people respond to that. And so for me, the cheese had gone from the private sector, the public sector. They cut all the funding. That was my cheese. I had a little bit in the private sector. And so it's like I've got to get into the private sector. But you start realising that people don't necessarily want rehab.
Right.
Some people need it.
Yes.
And whether they want it or not, they need it.
Definitely.
But some people don't need it. And so there was other sort of ways that people could access treatment that suited their needs.
And when you say treatment, what does that kind of look like? If you're not talking about rehab, what does that look like?
Well, again, even like when you think about an alcoholic or a drug addict, you might think of like the worst case scenario. But people are all on different levels of that, or different parts of the journey. And so people that reach their, what we call the rock bottom a bit earlier on, they just may need a mild sort of detox, possibly some therapy, possibly some personal development. And so over the years, you sort of discover that as you do assessments with people, you can kind of assess their needs. Now, a rehab, it's kind of like a high amount of needs and there's a high amount of money. You might not need all that a rehab has to offer. So we found other rehabs that don't offer so much, like the Priory, for example. You'd have a lot of doctors and nurses in there. That'd be high need, but that's sort of 28 grand a month. You're paying for a lot of doctors and nurses that you don't really need. So if you go in a place that doesn't have that, you could have the same sort of quality for like 12, 13 grand a month. And so, but even go less than that, if you don't really need rehab and all you need is a supervised detox, you can go down a couple of grand. If you want an addiction therapist, it's like if you want to go to AA and just have some therapy. So there's so many different combinations of treatment for people. So
was the vision then, I guess, of kind of being like a triage to help people access?
100%.
Because I guess there's a lot of, if you can imagine like your child or relative finally getting to the point where they need to access some help, most people now, the first thing they do is punch a query into Google, ask a question, isn't it, to find out what to do, because nobody's got a little plan of how you deal with this, because it's quite a difficult and distressing situation, isn't it?
Well, I think that's the thing. People are very vulnerable and they don't always understand. Again, if somebody's saying, "Oh, spend £30,000 on your daughter," or spend 12,000,
get them the best care possible.
Well, you might not realise, well, the 12,000 is just good care.
It's what she needs,
and it's probably may even be better than the £30,000. So again, it's like you kind of realise that when people are vulnerable like that you know, they're not always getting the best advice, and this is where the dodgy referrals come in.
Right. So, because I'm guessing, so most people search via Google, don't they? I mean, there are other search engines as well, but most people search via that. So how would that impact on what you get then? If somebody sits at their computer and go, "I need help for my alcoholic dad," how does that impact to what they get thrown back at them?
Well, again, this is where people don't understand about the search engine. So the more money that you have...
And we're talking as a business, more money.
As a business, the more work you've spent developing your search engine optimization, you're going to get a lot more people come on your site. And when you go on them sites, you're going to get the salespeople that are going to sell you. If it's a big rehab, they're going to sell you their rehab. If it's a referral company, they're hopefully going to find what's best for you. Or they're going to try and sell you what gets them the most commission.
And I guess this is the bit that most people have picked up when they kind of did a bit of a story back end of last year, saying that there are undesirables, let's say, in the referral business.
Well, there's undesirables in the rehab business, if you ask me. There's really undesirables in every business.
In
with
business
his money,
and
there's a lot of money. And you've got vulnerable people that are just looking for someone to trust.
So how do people know they're making the right decision then?
They don't. They have to go on their instincts. Or recommendation. Again, it's you're going to get a salesperson. Whether you phone my company or a rehab or any referrals person. And they're going to try and sell you whatever their product is. Again, that's kind of the way the world is.
So what makes us different then?
Well, I'd like to think the same as my rehab. I built my rehab being honest and decent, and I think I got a reputation for that in the industry. And so I felt that I could bring that integrity into, I don't like even to say like referrals. I like to think that we are more sort of triage. We're addiction treatment advisors. You know, we give consultancy to people.
We do.
That I'm hoping that we can, because again, I realised that it's an important part of the industry, the referrals part of it, because in the public sector, they're big on giving their clients choice.
Right.
But in the private sector, you might not get that choice.
Why is that?
Well, because if you just phone a rehab, they're only going to try and sell you their product.
Whether it's right for you or not.
Whether it's right for you or not. You can only say you can presume that, but it kind of makes sense. If that's all they got, that's probably what they're going to...
Well, it's a bit like walking into the Apple store. They're not going to really sell you a Samsung.
No, they're not going to say, oh, do you realise there's Samsung down the road?
Yeah, that's a nice phone.
Or Nike.
Yeah.
Nokia, not Nike.
I was going to say, different
But
thing.
yeah, that's just the way of the world, isn't it? So again, the more I realised about being in that sort of end of the industry, like one thing I learned myself is how little I knew about marketing.
Yeah. Which, again, I guess most people don't really understand that to survive of any type of business in the day and age we live in, there's a lot of money that needs to be spent on marketing of all different types.
A lot of money on marketing.
So we've touched on the search engine
Yes,
stuff.
I don't think people understand that. And the more you learn about it yourself, the more you realise other people don't know.
No.
And again, the people making money know.
Yes.
Because they're usually doing it.
Well, they've been doing it for a long time.
They're doing it for a long time and they're good at it, and that's why they're successful, and that's why they're making a lot of money.
Because if you're coming up as number one or number two, the chances are you're going to get chosen a lot quicker.
It's not because they're more caring or better. It's because they're better at business and they're better at marketing.
Yeah. So because there's been this whole talk about restructuring the referral industry, which you rightly said that it's not just referral companies that make money out of this, but also rehab to rehab and stuff like that too.
Yeah.
How would you say then, if they were to say ban referrals or stop referrals, how would that affect the smaller rehabs?
Well, it put them out of business.
Right.
Because again, most of the smaller, again, it's the charity ones as well.
Yeah.
See, a lot of the charity ones is like I say, the people at the top want to build monopolies,
Right.
so they want to get rid of competition.
So do you think that's the ultimate driver then?
I think that's the ultimate drive for everyone in business.
Yeah.
To put your competition out of business.
Yeah.
I think they're all again, you only got to do it by, creating a lot of barriers.
Right.
So I think through a lot of, so I think even putting referrals out of business is creating more barriers for the lower end ones.
Yes.
Because they can't compete with the top end ones.
No, but why can't they compete with the top end?
Because they haven't got the money.
Yeah.
They haven't got the ability.
It always goes back to that one thing.
Yeah, because they haven't got. It takes a lot of money to compete.
It does.
And it takes a lot of money to market. And again, if we're the third in the country at the minute, but the distance between us and the second is 1 million miles.
Yeah.
And between us and the first is 2 million miles.
Yeah.
So even though we're doing everything to compete, which again is what we're supposed to do in this country, which is what we are doing, a lot of the poor end and a lot of the bigger ones, they want to pull down.
Yeah.
So even some of the big companies trying to pull us down, they're not trying to pull us down because they're good people. They're trying to put us out of competition.
So it's a little bit similar to what's been happening with Mark Zuckerberg and the whole Facebook stuff. Is that he's created something that's building another type of monopoly.
Because in a free market, the thing that keeps the prices down is competition.
And I suppose for us as well, because we are a triage service and we do partner closely with a couple. We partner with a recovery retreat and we partner with a rehab. Those people probably would not have access to those clients if they didn't come through a service like ours.
No, because in a way, what they're not doing is they're not marketing.
No.
We're becoming their marketing
part
of their business. So we're sort of sharing the marketing, which allows us then to compete with the bigger companies.
And also allows them to do their treatment.
Yes, because
which is what they should be doing.
Because they would have to be spending and the sort of money we are, and doing all the work we are.
Yeah.
And then if 10 of them started doing that, then they'd all be competing with each other.
Totally.
So then we'd all have to be spending more. This is the nature of the beast. So again, you get the more charity focused rehabs. They don't want to compete at all. Their goal is to pull down.
Yes.
Because they just want to be given.
Yes. Well, they don't rely on funding in the same. They have.
Well, they still look at the private sector as like the public sector. The public sector, you compete to be given money.
Yeah.
So in the private sector, they don't want to compete because they'd have to spend more money on their own marketing, and it's a lot of money.
And you need experts.
Yeah,
as well,
and a lot of them won't work with referrals company, which seems very short-sighted because, again, people think that, and that's probably one of your questions, is like, do we make the industry more expensive? It's like, well, my truth is that most of the most expensive rehabs don't work with referrals companies. They spend all their money on marketing. Mm-hmm. The lower end don't want to work with referrals companies, but they don't spend money on marketing.
Yeah, and you mean they do want to work with referral companies?
Well, they don't. I think they don't. They don't want to because they, like I did. I used to have some moral problem with it, but then the more I kind of learned about it, I thought this is actually an important part of the industry.
Yes.
It should be regulated without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, so regulation, what does that look like, though? Because I think we kind of touched upon that earlier. It has to be a balance.
We have a self-regulation to make sure that, again, the people that we employ, like, we all agree that we would rather find the right treatment, not what makes us the most money. Because, again, we have agreements with the rehabs because we're doing their marketing.
Yeah.
So they kind of pay by results. So if we get a client that fits their treatment service, then they give us a commission, which is good for them and it's good for us.
I don't think it just stops there, though, isn't it? Because I think one of the things we do, which a lot of people don't realise, is it's not just about the marketing. It's not just about that. Also, our treatment advisors, they support that person and that family.
We offer a lot of support and a lot of aftercare.
And a lot of free stuff. Which we can only do because of that, isn't it?
So again, we're more partners with them. We sort of feel more like that. That, again, we're trying to improve the industry because if you can get them competing, but competing with us, again, because we offer a lot of business support as well and help them compete in the market that they're in.
Well, yeah, because they're specialists in addiction treatment. They're not specialists in this type of
you find that
genre,
the people that are sort of doing it just because they care are often not good at business, which is a bit of a fault.
Yeah.
Because then they can't develop their care and their standards can be a little bit, they're not always as nice as they could be if they had a bit more money coming in.
Yeah.
So again, I think we just got a nice email from one of our partners saying, you know, how much they've managed to develop their service since they started working with us, because we're fairly competing in the private sector and we're literally winning clients based on good service and good prices and good, just giving people a good service, a good experience.
Well, and as well, I think it again goes down to accessibility, because unless you can compete in those spaces such as Google, some of those people don't know that you've got a service they actually want and fits them because they just can't compete. No. I mean, we work with a lot of therapists as well, that they'd have no chance competing in that sort of environment.
No, even therapists.
Even though they're the top notch at their game.
Not about the marketing.
They can't do it. So it's like it's having access to these specialists that maybe you wouldn't have a chance to access, which means we're providing great client care. Because I think that's the goal, isn't it? Is to make sure all the clients have the best sort of experiences possible and support their families through that. And I think that goes down to, like, some of the smaller independent rehabs, is that their treatment is top notch, but people wouldn't know they exist.
Well, that's one of the things.
And unless we help them, they potentially could shut.
No, we used to get people come from more expensive rehabs and they weren't happy.
No.
because they realised that we were like a third of the price, but just as nice and maybe not nicer for some
Yeah.
people that we were. But again, they wouldn't know that because you think if you pay more, you're going to
Get
get more.
better service.
To some degree, there's sort of true. I don't think you're going to get better treatment necessarily.
No.
You might just have a nicer chef and beds and stuff like that, tellies and. But again, the worlds are changing, and part of what we're doing is raising up the standard. But if somebody could trust that, but at the same time, a lot of people think that private treatments out of their budget. But again, because we work with so many different people, we can put together some pretty good packages that may still cost money, but there'd be no waste in it. It's like, look, this is what because again, as it unfolds, what you need at the beginning is usually sort of a very expensive detox.
Yes.
And then treatment starts to taper off.
Yeah.
And so you can build some quite good packages. And again, it's trying to sort of see the world in a different way now. And I think that's sort of after being sort of 34 years in this business,
Yeah.
you can see the world changing. When I started, it was very hard to get someone off of heroin.
Yeah.
It's not that hard so much anymore. But I mean, the ongoing recovery is a bit different, but the world is a changing place. And so the treatments should be changing.
Well, I think as well for some people is that because they need that urgent need, and if they are in a position to do that, they are going to be willing to pay for private care, especially with this type of situation, because we know, we can get somebody into a facility tomorrow if we needed to, where if you were going down another sort of route through charity or through local drug and alcohol authorities, you could be waiting months, potentially years to access that type of help. So again, I think there's this, I'm going to be quite harsh and say demonisation of this whole scene and what it looks like, because we've both said everybody's getting paid regardless of which route they're coming through. But there's been this whole debate really that will people start choosing money over client care because of referrals. Do you believe that to be true, or is that your experience in any way?
Well, I think we're all noticing shrinkflation. I'm sure that's happening in every sector.
Yeah. But do you think particularly referrals would, let's say, put somebody in a rehab that's not suitable for them because they'll get higher margins?
I would say some would, yeah.
Some would.
We wouldn't.
No.
Because, again, we have a self-monitoring standards.
Yes.
So, not only do our staff agree, we have a way of checking the process. And so, again, we're very strict on it's the questions that they give to us, the answers that they give to us.
So like the assessment
stage.
Yes,
it's their circumstances and their needs determine what they get offered. Which again, because we work with, multiple rehab centres and treatment providers.
Yeah.
Again, if you phone a rehab, you're not going to, like you say, iPhone shop's not going to tell you about the Samsung shop down the road. No.
But there's been this thing about by coming through a referral agency, they are actually putting extra money on the referral or driving up the cost.
No, that's not.
I think that's a little bit of a mistruth, isn't it?
Yeah, that's not true. I think most referrals like us, we do agreements with the centres that we work with, depending how much front end of the work are we doing.
Yeah.
But it's... and again, also to remember that most of the more expensive rehabs don't work with referral companies.
Which is an interesting other side of the story, isn't it?
Yes, the people that do work with referral companies are often more... cheaper. Cost effective.
Yeah, more affordable, let's put it that way.
They have to be because, again, I think they're competing in a market. So they want, again, you want to... what you want is for the person to have a really good experience and get more than they're paying for.
Yes.
And you want to make a profit so you can develop your business.
So part of the free assessments that we do is that we take into those factors, don't we, to be able... Because there's been this also argument that people doing assessments aren't are not positioned or qualified enough, because there's been this argument that it should only be clinicians that should do assessments?
Well, we're really only assessing the centre.
Yes.
The centres assess the needs of your
Yes.
medical needs. We kind of do a rough assessment of that to
Yes.
find the centre, but that's not the only assessment done. The clinicians are in the...
So they dive deeper and have doctors.
They're the ones responsible
Yeah.
for making sure we can only give a rough idea of this is what we think your needs are, which are pretty accurate.
How do we do that then?
Well, there's set standards.
Yes.
And there's guidelines through NICE.
Yeah.
And again, for a lot of what we've got is 34 years of experience.
Yes.
So again, we've come out of a rehab, so we've gained a hell of a lot of experience. So we can assess somebody's needs, but ultimately that's not sort of set in stone until it's medically assessed
Yeah.
by a doctor. But
Because it has to be, yeah.
Yeah, but that'll be a different stage
Yeah.
of the assessment. We're only offering like triage.
Yeah.
We're not treating you. We're just triaging you. We're just assessing what department's best for you to go to.
Yeah. I think there's also been this argument that a lot of websites are trying to, so again, just to clarify, referral websites or even rehab websites who have referral websites alongside of that are trying to highlight that they're neutral and impartial, and they're not impartial. How do you think people would be able to tell the difference? I mean, I guess from our position is that when you look at Rehabs UK website, you'll see a lot of educational, informative content on there. You'll also see a lot of experts talking about different topics that they're specialised in, because that's kind of what we do, isn't it? We link people with specialists. We don't, pretend otherwise. How would somebody understand when they pick up that phone and speak to that person for the first time? How would they know that's the right one for them to speak to?
Well, again, I think it is good to check the websites.
Yeah.
And check the reviews.
Yeah.
I think that's always a good thing.
Do you think it's how they've kind of responded to? Because I think for me...
I think the difficulty is that people are very vulnerable.
Yeah.
And again, it's, salespeople are usually very good at winning your trust, but it's kind of what you want to do. So it is one of them things that is kind of very difficult to sort of do your own work, but you should go along with your gut feeling. And again, I think it's good to do your research. I do think it's good to check the websites.
Yeah, and I think as well, you can normally tell a little bit if there's real images and not stock images and things like that.
And again, if they're trying to do a hard sale on you, because again, it's not one of the things that we generally do.
We certainly don't, no.
We try just to sort of inform people
and
let them sort of guide them to make their own decisions. But I think if somebody's trying to do a hard sale on you or, be sceptical of that.
Definitely, or pressurising you in any way.
Over salesy, of course, we've got salespeople, but they're trying to be sort of caring and considerate. So if you sort of feel like you're being oversold, have a good think about that. But again, you can get that phone in a rehab too.
You totally can.
Because they're all, not all, but a majority of them have got salespeople on commission.
Yeah.
So again,
everybody's getting paid.
I'm not against all of that. It's just the way of the world. I think sometimes when people are talking about care, it's like, everybody's getting paid. The children's hospitals are getting paid. In actual fact, they're complaining about the children's hospitals being overpaid.
Yeah.
So it's like, but everybody's got to get paid, otherwise we just don't exist.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the big things that sets our treatment advisors apart is they genuinely do care. They literally do. And they will, one of the big things a lot of people don't know is you can't force somebody into rehab, and most of the interactions we have are with family members. So often they will go down the route of wanting to always speak to the individual first to actually really assess what's going on for them, because often families don't know the truth of that. But then they can give them the right advice. But we would also never, ever put somebody forward for a referral if we knew they did not want to go to rehab. We would not let anybody pay a deposit for a rehab if we knew that person had no intention of going. We would never do that. It's just not what we do.
Yeah, well, I think if you feel there's not integrity in the process, then
Definitely.
beware, because, again, we try and always keep a high integrity in what we're doing. Again, just going back to that about, if the rehabs if the referrals were put out of business, it would be also very difficult for any new projects to start.
Yes.
And a lot of the lower end projects would go out of business because they depend on that, because just for the simple fact they cannot compete.
They don't have the time, do they, either?
All the money is so expensive that they just couldn't compete with the marketing. So
no, exactly.
And some of the other good things that we do, just to sort of blow our own trumpet, that over 90% of the people that we talk to, we earn £0. That we refer everybody to the treatment that they can afford, that we think's best for them.
So we do a lot of signposting for those people who might ring up and they don't have funding for any type of private treatment. And when we say private treatment, that could be as little as £80. It could be like as little as that. But we do a lot of signposting, which I think is hugely important. We don't send people off with no help at all.
No, we make sure that we try and help.
And as well as the aftercare as well, which as a referral company,
I think we're the only one that does it.
We're definitely the only one we do it.
We do aftercare, family groups, with therapists that we pay for that are free.
Yeah, exactly. For people to access, isn't it?
I found this in my life, even like running a rehab. The people that usually complain about me trying to make money are the ones that are not giving me any.
Yes.
The people that have given me money over the years to help them are usually very happy.
Yeah.
Because we always try and offer a good service.
So there's also been this argument as well about people's data.
Yeah.
Because you're picking up the phone, like you rightly said, you're speaking to a salesperson, whether it's a rehab or whether it's a referral company, and then that person might then get referred. So there's a lot of people's personal data being, I guess, thrown out in various different manners. Sometimes without
that would probably be a good question to ask. What's happening with my data, and do you subscribe to the?
Yes, to any sort. You have to give permission for that. Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the big things is always a genuine person that you speak to will say, X person is going to call you. X person from this rehab is going to call you. They wouldn't just say, thanks very much, leave it with me, and then you get 20 million phone calls from people you've never heard of before. I think that's definitely something we've always, we certainly wouldn't work in that way.
What's that practice called?
Oh, GDPR.
No, the practice of them doing that, where they...
where they kind of just
share your information with everybody.
Yes, yeah. So there could be referral companies that might just they might have a list and send all that information out to people in one go. So you could potentially be receiving phone calls from people you have no idea who they are, and that's your personal information, your name, your telephone number, email address. So I think that's something we totally believe there should be more legislation on to protect people's information, because it is important.
Again, the last thing you want when you're struggling is 20 phone calls from salespeople.
Yes.
But again, I think that's just lazy.
It's not doing the right thing for the client.
But it gets them the most money if they kind of scatter the load. Scatter the referral rather than trying to work with you and finding the best place.
Yeah. I mean, again, we probably do a lot of speaking to people initially before that even gets to that stage. And then it's always very clear of who you'll be receiving a phone call from, where they're from. The assessments we do, we always take those 3 factors into consideration, don't we? So it could be location, it could be budget, and also treatment philosophy as well, because we've mentioned 12-step.
Yeah, for those people that don't know, there's so many different forms of treatment. It's trying to find the one that suits you. There's lots of different costs. So it's trying to find the right budget for you. And location. Some people want to travel even to Bali or South Africa or just go to a different town where they're anonymous. So again, we can...
I guess that's where those assessments come in handy, though, because again, you don't know what you want, number one, or what you need.
Well, people don't even know what a lot of things actually mean, so it can all be broken down and explained. If you're not sure, then ask the questions. That's what I'd like to call them treatment consultants.
Yeah.
That we're just offering consultancy and trying to help you find the best treatment for you. Because there's lots of different kinds, and it's better to be informed, because we believe that will help raise your chances of
So do you think
succeeding.
some centres or places or providers might sell people stuff they don't need?
I think you can't help it, really.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like if you go in a spa hotel, but you don't want to go in the spa, you're still paying the same price.
That's a good point.
If you're going in a spa and an hotel, you don't want the breakfast. So again, I've kind of what I like what we do.
Yes.
Is that we can cut out the thing. I mean, look, people with loads of money, they're like, they don't care.
They don't care, no.
Just send me to the best place.
Yeah.
And they don't. But the people that are on a bit more of a budget, you know, we can make better treatment more affordable to them.
I think that's the thing. We kind of personalise it to that
You
situation,
can
don't we?
personalise it and say, well,
which you wouldn't get from someone else.
If you haven't got the budget, you can still, like, we might put someone in, they might have high detox needs, which is going to be expensive for them, because they are going to need the doctors and the nurses.
Yeah.
But it's to say, look, you only need that for 2 weeks. Then you can go to this place. It's a hell of a lot cheaper and nice for the 2 weeks after that. And you've saved yourself a hell of a lot of money, and it makes it more achievable for people.
Yeah.
And some people, they need a long time.
Yeah.
And so, but they can't afford to pay the high end. The high end don't do a long time because nobody pays for it.
No.
So you want to come down to more cost-effective places that are really nice. So they're more like a retreat. Because again, it's like having all the staff and therapists and doctors and nurses. That's what makes it super expensive. Now you might need them at the beginning, but you don't necessarily need them all the way through.
I think as well, that's another thing that we offer, because with people who go to rehab facilities or whatever, when they come out, they can instantly join in with their aftercare if they've got aftercare at that particular place, but they can also access our aftercare.
Yeah, and if you want
weekly
therapy,
groups,
you can get a therapist,
all that kind of stuff too.
Outside that we can recommend addiction-trained therapists. So.
And we don't put time limits on our aftercare.
So,
you'll find that in a lot of places.
So
they'll
if you
say,
kind of sort of a high end and you still want to work and don't want to be away from your family, you can build a pretty decent program from home.
So do you think if they were to, like I said,
and we're always there to support you.
100%.
There's no end to our aftercare. As long as we're in existence.
Yeah.
You can always call and get any support that you need.
Well, our treatment advisors offer recovery coaching.
We speak to people for years.
years and years and years and years. And their families for years and years and years.
And they need to go back in, or they need some help or advice.
Because I think that's the passionate thing about recovery. I think there's this whole demonisation of the private sector a little bit, to say it's all about money, but it's not. It's that for us, unless we get a certain amount of money in each month, we can't carry on.
Well, we
can't support those
there's
smaller
still a lot
places.
more that we want to do to develop, but
Definitely.
we can't because we haven't got the money.
No. And that's the goal, isn't it?
That's
because
the goal.
the more rehabs we can help support in opening.
Well, there's £2 billion in this industry.
Yeah.
And we're not getting anywhere near that.
No.
Somebody,
we wish.
Somebody is. We're just trying to get more of the market
to
offer a better service and help improve.
Yeah.
Because again, like that, them places that we work with, their projects improve.
Yeah.
Because they get more money coming in, plus they get good advice. We give them consultancy on their businesses, on their treatment, what we know that works. Because again, we work with a lot of different treatment providers, so we can also see what works in the industry.
Yeah.
And we can share that information with each other to help improve them businesses.
And the knock-on effect from that, I guess, means that there's potentially more independent facilities can open, more chances by recovery.
Like. I think that bit wouldn't happen. And I think that's happening across the board in the countries. It's getting harder for small people that really care to start up.
Yeah,
because they can't do it because of the monopolies.
Yes.
The big companies have cornered the whole market because Google allows that to happen.
Yes.
Unfortunately, there's no way around it. The only thing you can do is compete.
Yes. Well, I think there's been arguments of maybe getting to Google to look at the restructuring of how that. But I don't,
No, I think that would only favour, even if they shut down the referrals, that would just then favour all of the big rehabs, and all the small rehabs would close.
Yeah. And I think what people
Unless
don't
they're
realise...
taking referrals from the big rehabs.
Yeah. And I think what people don't realise, that these smaller independent rehabs, if they can't make the money because they don't get the clients, which we've talked about earlier, they will close. And that means there's no recovery for miles and miles and miles. I mean, we know it's definitely... If you look at on the UK map of all the rehabs that were there to what aren't there now, it's quite shocking, and no wonder we are in the position that we are with more people dying than ever.
No, I think definitely. I think the world's changing, like I said, and I think it's sort of thinking outside the box and redesigning it and trying to remove all the unnecessary bits and just leave what's necessary that's effective and affordable, which I guess would be what we'd be aiming at, looking for effective and affordable.
Definitely.
And you can see who that is and who it isn't.
I mean, you would argue that some people would say that the ultimate goal is for alcohol and drug addiction treatment is free for everybody, but that is not...
But I can't, look, you could say that, even if it was a wonderful, NHS had a wonderful system, which it doesn't.
Yes.
There's still people with money going to go to...
the private sector.
To the private sector. That's what they like. So, that's all we're really offering.
Yeah.
We don't work with any statutory people.
No.
If you want free addiction treatment, go to your local drug and alcohol agencies. That's kind of what we tell you.
Well, we help people find them through them.
But if you want quicker and possibly better treatment, then there's other options. But you don't have to pay. Nobody's forcing you to. But it's just... I like using the private sector in different areas of my life. I don't like to depend on government. I pay for private healthcare. Yeah. It's because I just don't want to hang around in the NHS.
Yeah. It's benefits, isn't it? Normally more accessibility, quicker.
And, if you can afford it, it works good for the NHS as well. Not taking up a bed of theirs.
No, which is another counter-argument, I guess.
Probably more expensive than my private bed.
So, just to maybe sort of wrap up, really, do you feel that brokerage and referrals, is that the right sort of terminology we should be using?
It's like everything. People use them terms. Again, they make it like you're making money, so you're a bad person. But show me somebody that ain't making money. And everybody's making money. It's a good thing. I don't know why everyone demonises it.
No, again, as long as the care's there.
As long as the care and there's integrity in it, and you're doing it correctly, which I believe we are. So I don't like, they use them words to try and, again, it's like, of course there's bad people in our industry, there's bad people in every industry, and they should be ironed out, but you don't get rid of the whole industry. I honestly believe the service we offer brings a lot of value to the industry.
Well, the feedback we get is...
Well, we get great. And again, if you understand the industry, we bring a lot of value to it.
Yeah.
And in the country that we're in, that, we're competing fairly. I want industry standards.
Yes.
Because I don't believe everybody's competing fairly.
No.
And that's...
Across the board.
Yes, and I'm trying to be honest and decent. That's not fair for me.
But that's kind of why we're having this conversation, isn't it? Because there's a lot of stuff being talked about, some would say behind closed doors, but there seems to be this also narrative, which it seems a little bit unfair to not being able to
I think the agenda is, again, I believe in pulling people up.
Yes.
I think they believe in pulling people down.
For sure.
And I don't like that society.
No.
I think we should be pulling people up. That's been my life. My life is about helping empower people so they can pull them up. But again, it's harder to pull people up than it is to pull them down. And I do believe in healthy competition. That's the path that I've chosen to say there's a big problem in this country. There's these massive multinational, multi-million-pound companies that are like these big trawlers, and I've pretty much got a little boat with a fishing rod. Yeah. But compete, improve. Yeah. I'm not trying to pull them down. All I'm saying is let's have fair competition. But don't, the people that are trying to put us out of businesses are the big companies.
Yes.
because it suits their agenda of killing competition.
Monopolies.
And that's a big problem we should watch for
Yeah.
on every part of our society.
Well, I think it's not just our clients about feedback, but it's also the rehab facilities that we work with. They're more than happy. They
I think
actually
if
go.
you talk to everyone we work with, they say that we think this is a good service. I worked with referrals for 30 years, and the ones I work with are very happy, good partners.
Yeah.
And they offer great service. They took a lot of weight off of our company.
For sure.
And the amount of that we shared with them, I was happy to give them.
Yeah.
Because they were brought value, and it didn't cost people any more.
No.
If as a rehab, if I got somebody come direct, I just made more money.
Yeah.
The referrals,
but they do all the work for you in a sense, wouldn't they?
So it wasn't.
You just worry about the treatment end.
Yes, I don't think it would save any money.
No, I think that's the biggest narrative that's been.
I think we save money because I think we're helping to improve the industry for people.
I think that's definitely been a goal from day one.
We talk to people about the price point, the service that they're offering. They have no way of looking at their competitors.
No.
So we can often say, look, you're way out overpriced.
Yeah.
The way that you're behaving is not good. I think we bring more.
We drive the standard up.
I think
overall.
we bring the standards up, and I think we bring a lot to the industry.
Yeah,
and again, I've been in the industry 34 years, plus I run a rehab for about over 20 of them years. So again, we're offering a lot of benefits to people, and we're giving a lot of good advice to people.
But we're also not naive to know that there's not also the flip side of the coin of the industry that needs looking at, and we kind of welcome that, don't we?
It's always with this money.
Yeah.
And again, I think that needs to be, but again, I don't agree in regulating because that just drives the costs up for everybody, and that's just stupid. No. This country's stupid at that.
Yeah. It's got to be balanced, isn't it?
We do need a minimal regulation.
I think as well it can't be certain people or certain businesses that choose that regulation. I think it has to be like a neutral regulator.
Yeah, because we keep thinking of that ourselves. I mean, we self-regulate, and then we keep thinking about setting up a standard, but you can't really do it for yourself.
No, you need somebody independent.
You need an independent.
I mean, that would be sometimes
there is
the CQC.
other people trying to do it, but again, I think their agendas are not quite
aligned
with our values. I think there's a bit of hidden agendas going on behind the scenes.
Well, a lot behind the big rehabs are massive investors, aren't there? So there's unfortunately, money is the root of all evil, and to some degree, there's always going to be that side too.
Yeah.
So.
And rich people like to spend their money on decent places.
Yeah.
It's like, look, I had one of the best rehabs in the country. One of my problems was people wouldn't come to me because I didn't charge enough.
No, because they thought you can't be providing
you
that great
can't be as good as them because you're not that.
Yeah.
So again, you try and keep it low end, and then people with money don't want to come there.
Oh, it's hard, isn't it? It's tricky.
Well, I think there's a reality.
Yeah.
But beating up people earning a living is stupid.
Yes.
If they're doing it dishonestly or got no integrity, then there should be things to stop them. But I mean, we could say that about pretty much the whole country at the minute. It's like ridiculous.
It's all about level of care.
Even the regulations that are being regulated don't seem to be regulated very well. So.
No. I think it's like our biggest thing has always been care before money. And that's why none of us are driving big 4x4 Mercs and...
hopefully. Well, I think I deserve to get paid. If you don't want me to be paid, then there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
And again, if we're successful, then I think that's good for everybody. That's, again, my philosophy on society.
Yeah.
Everybody should be successful. I want the best care for you.
Yes.
And your family. I want the best care, and I want the best review.
For the money you've got.
Yes, and I want you to be happy with what you've paid me. And I think, I've been paid for doing this for 30 years, and I'm pretty sure 99% of the people are happy to have paid me.
I would say so.
So that's my standard. My standard is I'm more realistic. I've always worked on payment for outcomes.
Yes.
And I always want
performance almost.
Yes,
isn't it?
I want people to be happy with the service that they're getting. And they are.
Yeah.
Like I say, the only people I know that complain about me and money have never given me any.
No, well, I was shocked when I looked at that data and it said like nearly 91% of people we speak to don't even pay us a penny. Because again, that just reinforces this whole false story that we're all money, 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 and actually we just take.
I've got a whole career that shows that I put people before money.
Yeah.
And I give up about 90% of my income to helping people. So I know who I am, and I've got history that proves
we're lucky
that.
to have a team that is on that
and if
same
anyone
page.
tells you any different about me, they're lying.
Yeah.
Well, they've had a bad experience with me, but hey, everybody's going to have that.
There's always one bad review.
Well, there's nobody perfect. Well, sometimes you do things wrong, but sometimes, again, the industry working, they're not all mentally sound.
No.
So bless them. But I think overall, we're doing a fantastic job.
Yeah.
And it does upset me that I always seem to be being attacked.
Yes.
But there you go. That's the world I live in.
It is, unfortunately.
But all I want is a fair playing field. I understand it's about competition. I don't want a competition to pull people down.
No.
I want to be a chance to pull myself up.
And to try and help as many people as we
based
possibly
on hard
can.
work and offering a great service. And I just want a fair playing field to compete the best I can.
Yeah.
And that's all I ask for. That's all anyone should ask for.
Yeah, 100%.
If they're trying to pull things down, don't listen to them.
No. Look at all the picture, not some of it.
Yeah, unless they're bad to the core.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, I think that brings us to the end. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. We shall do another one soon. I thank Danny for turning up and having a chat. It's her first video, so we've popped a podcast cherry. Anyway, thanks, guys, and look forward to the next one. God bless. Bye-bye.